The December rain came down in sheets, hammering the towering glass facade of Grayson Holdings like an angry fist against the sky. It was nearly midnight in New York, and the city had surrendered to a cold, relentless storm. Most of the building had gone dark hours ago, floors emptying one by one as executives and staff hurried home to warm apartments and waiting families. But on the 25th floor, a single office still burned with harsh white light. Thomas Grayson sat motionless behind his sleek, obsidian desk, the CEO of the multi-billion-dollar empire that bore his name. His untouched coffee had turned cold long ago. Spreadsheets and quarterly projections flickered across 3 massive monitors, but his eyes weren't seeing the numbers anymore. They were seeing ghosts. With a heavy, bone-deep sigh, he snapped the laptop shut, the sound sharp in the silence. He shrugged on his long charcoal wool coat, hand-tailored in London, the kind of coat that cost more than most people made in a month, and stepped into the corridor. His footsteps echoed, lonely and deliberate, the only sound in a building that usually thrummed with ambition and urgency. The private elevator carried him down in perfect silence, the mirrored walls reflecting a man who looked every bit the untouchable titan the world believed him to be. Tall, broad-shouldered, late 40s, silver just beginning at the temples, jaw carved from years of giving orders and never taking them. The doors slid open to the cavernous marble lobby, and Thomas froze. Near the revolving doors, on the long leather bench beneath the massive abstract sculpture no one ever understood, sat a tiny figure curled into a protective ball. A little girl, no older than 5, clutching a faded pink backpack to her chest like a shield. Her light blonde hair was damp and clinging to pale, cold cheeks. Her coat was far too thin for December, soaked through from the rain. She wasn't crying. She wasn't shivering. She was simply waiting, legs tucked beneath her, enormous blue eyes fixed on the bank of elevators with the patient certainty of a child who had done this many times before. Thomas's hand tightened in his coat pocket. He could have walked past. He had walked past far worse things in his life. Homeless veterans on subway grates, exhausted nannies asleep on park benches, mothers begging outside delis while clutching babies. He had built an empire on the ruthless art of looking away, but those eyes, wide, calm, filled with a quiet, unbreakable hope, stopped him dead. He took one slow step forward. Then another. "Hey, little one," he said, his voice rough from hours of disuse. "What are you doing here so late?" The girl lifted her head. She didn't flinch. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, careful not to disturb the vast emptiness around them. "I'm waiting for my mommy. She works upstairs." Thomas frowned, glancing at the security desk, empty, the night guard probably on rounds. Upstairs? At this hour? Everyone's gone home. A tiny, heartbreaking smile. "She cleans the building." Then, even quieter, as if sharing the world's heaviest secret, "But my mommy is sick. I don't know the name of the sickness. She holds her tummy and shakes sometimes, but she told me not to tell anyone. If she loses her job, we can't buy her medicine." The words landed like a physical blow. Thomas couldn't breathe for a second. The lobby tilted. 35 years collapsed into a single heartbeat, and he was 9 years old again, sitting on a plastic chair outside a school janitor's closet at 2 a.m., waiting for his own mother to finish scrubbing floors so they could take the last bus home. He remembered her cracked, bleeding hands wrapped in plastic bags because gloves were a luxury they couldn't afford. He remembered her forcing a smile through the pain, whispering, "Just a little longer, Mijo. Then we go home." He had been too late for her. Heart attack on a bathroom floor alone, discovered only when the morning shift arrived. He swallowed hard against the sudden burn in his throat. The rain outside sounded like guilt, like accusations, like every promise he had never kept. The little girl, Amy, he would learn minutes later, pulled her soaked coat tighter around her small frame. "I just wait a little while," she whispered. "When Mommy finishes, we go home together. I don't want her to walk alone in the rain." Thomas looked away, blinking furiously against the sting in his eyes. This wasn't his problem. He wasn't responsible for the world's pain. He had built walls of money and power high enough to keep that truth out, but He couldn't move. Not this time. He crouched down slowly, bringing himself to her eye level, coat pooling expensively on the marble floor. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Amy." "And your mommy's name?" "Emma Carter." He stood, decision crystallizing like ice in his veins. "Come with me, Amy," he said, voice steady now. "Let's go find your mom." He lifted her gently. She weighed almost nothing, and felt her small arms wrap trustingly around his neck. She smelled like wet wool and children's shampoo and something heartbreakingly brave. As the service elevator carried them upward through the sleeping building, Thomas Grayson, billionaire, feared dealmaker, man who had everything and nothing, made a silent vow against the hum of. Emma survived the night, but barely. The diagnosis came like a verdict delivered in a quiet, fluorescent-lit hallway outside the ICU. Systemic lupus erythematosus in severe flare, compounded by chronic exhaustion, malnutrition, untreated secondary infections, and organ inflammation that had been silently raging for years. The attending physician, a tired but kind-eyed woman in her 50s, spoke in the measured tone reserved for delivering impossible news. "She's been fighting this alone for a very long time," the doctor told Thomas. "Most people couldn't stand the pain she's endured for even an hour, let alone months of night shifts on concrete floors. Her immune system is attacking her own body. Kidneys, joints, heart, everything. If she keeps living like this..." "I'm sorry, Mr. Grayson. Months, maybe less." Thomas stood outside the glass, arms folded so tightly his knuckles were white, staring at the woman who, just hours ago, had been invisible to him. Machines breathed for her now. Tubes and wires mapped a fragile lifeline across pale skin. Her light blonde hair lay damp against the pillow, face peaceful in unconsciousness, as if her body had finally surrendered after years of refusing to quit. Amy slept curled in the plastic chair beside him, clutching the same worn pink backpack she'd had in the lobby. Her small chest rose and fell in tiny, trusting breaths. Thomas hadn't moved in 6 hours. He stayed all night, at 4:17 a.m., when the hospital corridor was nothing but humming machines and distant beeps. Thomas made the calls most CEOs never make at that hour, calls that rewrote lives with the same decisiveness he once used to close 9-figure deals. First to Dr. Daniel Weiss, his old roommate from Yale, now head of rheumatology at Mount Sinai and one of the country's top lupus specialists. "Daniel, I need the best team you have. Money is irrelevant. Complete discretion. Patient's name is Emma Carter. She's in ICU at New York Presbyterian right now. I want her transferred to your care today." Daniel didn't ask why. "Send me the charts. I'll have a bed ready by noon." Second call, head of human resources, pulled from sleep. "Emma Carter, night shift janitorial, effective immediately. Indefinite paid medical leave, full salary continuation, retroactive enrollment in the Platinum Health Plan for her and her daughter. Backdate it's 6 months. Make it happen before sunrise. Consider it done, sir." Third call, facilities and building operations. Reassign Emma Carter to day shift administration when she returns. Light duties only. Permanent. No questions. "Yes, Mr. Grayson." No one asked why. When Thomas Grayson spoke at 4 a.m., the machine simply obeyed. A week later, Emma opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was Amy, asleep in the arms of a man she dimly recognized, the CEO whose building she cleaned. He was unshaven, tie long gone, white shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, eyes bloodshot from no sleep. He sat in the corner chair like he belonged there. She tried to speak. Only a rasp came out. "Amy?" Thomas was on his feet instantly, gently shifting the sleeping child so she wouldn't wake. "She's fine," he said softly, voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper. "She hasn't left your side once." Emma's eyes filled with tears that spilled silently down her temples into her hair. You brought us here?" He nodded once. "Why?" The word was barely audible, but it carried the weight of every sleepless night, every hidden pain, every moment she had smiled through agony so her daughter wouldn't worry. Thomas looked at her for a long, long moment. Then he glanced down at Amy's sleeping face, thumb in her mouth, trusting the world because her mother had taught her to. Because 30 years ago, he said, voice cracking for the first time. A little boy sat in a cold school hallway at 2 a.m., waiting for his mommy to finish cleaning classrooms so they could take the last bus home. She worked 3 jobs so he could go to a better school. She smiled through cracked, bleeding hands and told him everything would be okay. One night she didn't come out. They found her collapsed on a bathroom floor. Alone. He was in his first year of college. One day too late to say goodbye. His eyes, when they met Emma's again, were wet. "I was too late for her," he whispered. "I won't be too late for you." Emma closed her eyes, tears streaming freely now. For the first time in years, she let herself cry without hiding, without pretending to be strong. The machines beeped steadily around her, but inside something shifted, something that had been clenched in terror for so long finally loosened, just a fraction, when she was strong enough to speak without pain. Days later, her first real question was the one that had haunted her since waking. "How long can I stay on leave?" "As long as you need," Thomas answered without hesitation. "Your job is waiting. Your salary continues. Your daughter is safe. All bills are covered." She shook her head weakly against the pillow. "I can't accept charity." "It isn't charity," he said, firm but gentle. "It's correction. For every night you scrubbed my floors while I sat 25 stories above you pretending the world was fair. For every time you smiled through pain so your little girl wouldn't be afraid. And it's the only way I can sleep at night now." Emma searched his face. There was no pity there, only recognition. And something deeper, something that looked a lot like redemption. She didn't thank him. Not yet, but for the first time in years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the entire world alone anymore. 1 year later, snow fell in soft, silent curtains over Central Park, turning the city into a hushed, white dream. The bare trees glittered with frost, and the paths were empty except for 3 figures walking together beneath the gray December sky. Amy, now 6 years old, skipped ahead in bright red boots that left tiny prints in the fresh snow. Her laughter rang out like bells as she spun with her tongue out, trying to catch snowflakes. Her light blonde hair bounced beneath a wool hat with a pom-pom, cheeks pink from cold and joy. She had grown taller, stronger, her blue eyes brighter than they had ever been. The little girl who once waited alone in a rainy lobby now ran free, certain the world would catch her if she fell. Behind her, hand in hand, walked Emma and Thomas. Emma was healthy again, truly healthy for the first time in years. The lupus was under control, the flare-ups managed with the best care money could buy, and the kind of rest she had never allowed herself before. Her skin had lost its gray pallor, her eyes, once shadowed by pain, now carried light. She had gone back to school part-time, studying public and community health at NYU, determined to help the invisible people she once had been. Her nights were finally her own. Her days belonged to learning, to Amy, to living without the constant terror that one more shift might be her last. Thomas had changed too. He had stepped back from day-to-day control of Grayson Holdings. He still advised, still signed the big checks when needed, but the relentless 80-hour weeks were gone. Most of his time now belonged to the Mary's Hand Foundation, a nonprofit he had created in quiet honor of his mother. It poured millions into healthcare, childcare, education, and emergency support for single working mothers and their children. Amy had been the very first recipient of the Little Star Scholarship, though no one outside the 3 of them would ever know that detail. The foundation's logo was a simple open hand cradling a tiny star, and every grant letter ended with the same line, "You are not alone." They stopped at the edge of the frozen pond. Amy darted forward, waving wildly at a cluster of ducks huddled on the ice. "Look, they're having a meeting," she shouted, giggling. Emma leaned into Thomas's side. He wrapped an arm around her without thinking. It had become as natural as breathing. She wore a soft cream coat now, warm and well-made, a far cry from the soaked thin jacket of a year ago. Her hand rested easily in his. "You never answered my question," she said softly, her voice light but serious beneath the falling snow. "Which one?" he asked, though he already knew. "That night in the hospital when I asked why you stayed." She looked up at him, snowflakes catching in her lashes like tiny diamonds. You said you weren't staying because I needed you. You were staying because you needed me. He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. The park was silent except for Amy's distant laughter and the whisper of snow against branches. I meant it, he said, voice low, steady, stripped of every defense he had once worn like armor. I had everything the world says matters: money, power, a name on a building, and none of it kept the dark out. I was still the boy who didn't make it in time to say goodbye to his mother. Still carrying that hole. And then you and Amy walked into my life, literally waiting in my lobby, and suddenly the hole had edges. It had a shape. And for the first time in 30 years, it started to fill. Emma's breath caught. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't look away. I need you, he continued, because you remind me what strength actually looks like. Not closing deals or breaking records. Strength is a woman scrubbing floors at 3 a.m. with fire in her veins, refusing to let her daughter see her fall. Strength is a little girl waiting in the rain because she doesn't want her mommy to walk home alone. You taught me that. And I'm not letting that light go. Not ever. A single tear slipped down Emma's cheek, freezing almost instantly in the cold. She smiled, the first full, unguarded smile he had ever seen from her the night she realized she might live. Good, she whispered. Because I think I need you too. Amy came running back then, cheeks flushed, eyes shining like the snow itself. Mommy? Mr. Thomas. Look, I caught a snowflake and it didn't melt. She opened her red mitten. A perfect hexagonal crystal rested on the wool for one perfect second before vanishing. Thomas knelt, brushed a flake from her nose, and grinned. That's because it knew it was safe with you, little star. Amy giggled and launched herself at them both, arms wide. They caught her together, the three of them standing in a small circle as the snow fell thicker around them, cocooning them in white silence. Later, under the golden glow of street lamps, they walked home together, past the towering building that had once been just a cold workplace, now simply another landmark in the geography of their shared life. Thomas glanced at Emma. She glanced back. No words were needed. Some debts can never be fully repaid. Some wounds can never be completely healed. But sometimes, when the universe writes itself in the quietest way, a little girl waiting in a rainy lobby becomes the crack through which light finally pours into two broken hearts. And sometimes, being on time for someone else's mother is the only way to finally make peace with missing your own. They walked on, three silhouettes against a swirling snow, hands linked, footsteps in perfect rhythm to family, not by blood, but by choice, by graced, by love that had waited 35 years to find its way home.